The night before I left for college, my parents pulled me aside and confessed, "We traded your college fund for your brother's rehab 3 years ago." And I felt my stomach drop because I had turned down a full scholarship to stay closer to home like they begged me to. My mom kept saying it was temporary, while my brother sat in the living room playing video games, completely sober and working a $15 per hour job he refused to contribute from. I'm Jessica Sterling, 22 years old, and that moment shattered everything I thought I knew about my family's priorities. The kitchen where they delivered this bombshell felt suddenly smaller, the yellow walls that once seemed warm now pressing in on me like a trap. Dad avoided eye contact while Mom twisted her wedding ring, that nervous habit that appeared whenever she was about to deliver bad news. Through the doorway, I could see Marcus sprawled on our threadbare couch, controller in hand, completely oblivious to the conversation that was destroying my future 3 rooms away. "Sweetie, we never meant for it to go this long," Mom continued, her voice taking on that pleading tone that made my skin crawl. "But Marcus needed specialized treatment, and insurance wouldn't cover it all. We thought we'd be able to replace the money before you graduated, but then Dad's hours got cut and—" Stop. The word came out harder than I intended. Just stop talking. My hands trembled as I calculated the numbers in my head. $18,000. 4 years of saving every birthday check from Grandma, every dollar from my part-time job at the movie theater, every penny I'd earned tutoring kids in our neighborhood. Gone. Handed over to some overpriced facility where Marcus learned to paint rocks and talk about his feelings before promptly relapsing 6 months later. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was remembering how they'd begged me to turn down the full ride to State University. "We need you close to home," they'd said. "Marcus is struggling, and we want our family together during this difficult time." So I'd chosen the local college, planning to commute and use my savings to help with expenses. I'd wanted to be the good daughter, the responsible one who didn't cause problems or need rehabilitation centers or family therapy sessions. Dad finally looked up from the table, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Jess, we'll figure something out. Maybe you can take a gap year, work full-time, save up." "A gap year?" I laughed, but nothing about it was funny. "So I can spend 12 months watching Marcus blow his paycheck on video games while you guys enable him? While you keep pretending he's this victim instead of a grown man who refuses to take responsibility for anything?" The sound of gunfire erupted from the living room TV, followed by Marcus shouting at whoever he was playing online. The contrast was nauseating. Here we were, discussing the ruins of my educational future, while he scored headshots without a care in the world. Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "Jessica, you don't understand the complexity of addiction. Marcus is sick, not selfish. We had to choose between helping him get well or keeping your promise to your other child," I finished. "The one who never asked you to choose between a brother and a future." That's when I noticed the envelope peeking out from under a stack of unpaid bills on the counter. The return address made my blood run cold. Riverside Treatment Center. Not a bill, a thank you letter. I snatched it before they could stop me, my eyes scanning the elegant letterhead and personalized message thanking the Sterling family for their generous donation that made their new meditation garden possible. Donation. Not payment for treatment. Donation. My parents had given away my college fund to help a rehab center build a garden, and they'd been lying about it for 3 years. The paper crumpled in my fist as I stared at the 2 people who'd raised me to believe in hard work, honesty, and planning for the future. The same people who'd just proven they valued my drug-addicted brother's comfort over my education. Marcus's laughter drifted in from the living room, completely carefree, completely unaware that his family was willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to keep enabling his choices. But as I stood there, watching my parents' guilty faces, I realized something that would change everything. They had no idea what I'd discovered about Marcus's supposed sobriety or the meticulous records I'd been keeping for the past 6 months. They didn't know about the photos, the evidence, or the connections I'd made. They thought they were dealing with the same naive daughter who'd always put family first. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I packed my single duffel bag while my parents hovered in the doorway, still trying to convince me that community college wasn't that bad, that I could transfer later, that everything would work out. Their voices became white noise as I methodically folded the clothes I'd bought with my own money, each item a reminder of how carefully I'd budgeted for a future that no longer existed. "Jessica, please don't be dramatic about this," Mom said, wringing her hands. "It's just a delay, not the end of the world." I paused, holding the academic achievement certificates I'd planned to hang in my dorm room. "Did you know Marcus has been selling his Adderall prescription to kids at the community center?" The silence was deafening. Dad's face went white. "Or that he's been stealing gift cards from the grocery store where he works?" 3 different customers complained this month, but his manager Jake is his dealer, so nothing gets reported. Mom sank onto my desk chair. "That's not. Marcus wouldn't." "I have photos, Mom. Timestamps. Video from the Walgreens parking lot where he makes his deals." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a folder marked Documentation. "Want to see your precious victim selling pills to a 16-year-old girl whose parents think she's at study group?" The color drained from Dad's face as he recognized the girl in the photo. "That's the Henderson's daughter. Yep, honor student. swimming scholarship to USC. At least she had one before Marcus got his hooks in her. I kept my voice steady, clinical. Funny how addiction works, isn't it? How it spreads from the person you're protecting to innocent kids whose parents actually give a damn about their futures. Marcus appeared in my doorway, drawn by the tension. He looked genuinely confused, which would have been endearing if I didn't know it was just another mask he wore. What's going on? Jess, why does everyone look like someone died? Just discussing your entrepreneurial ventures, brother dear. I held up my phone so he could see the screen. Recognize this transaction? Tuesday afternoon, behind the Dollar Tree? His confusion melted into panic, then quickly shifted to the practiced vulnerability that worked so well on our parents. Jess, you don't understand what you're looking at. Sometimes I have to sell drugs to children to afford your gaming habit. I turned to my parents. By the way, that part-time job he supposedly has, he got fired 2 weeks ago for theft. He's been leaving every morning and spending his days at the arcade in the mall, using money from whatever he sold the night before. Mom made a strangled sound. Marcus, is this true? She's lying. His voice cracked, and for a moment, he sounded like the little boy who used to blame me when he broke something. She's just mad about college, so she's trying to turn you against me. This is exactly what Dr. Peterson warned us about, family members sabotaging recovery out of jealousy. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired it. Almost. Show them your bank statement, Marcus. Show them your pay stubs from the last month. I crossed my arms. Or, better yet, call your boss and ask him to verify your employment status while we all listen. He looked trapped, his eyes darting between our parents like a cornered animal. I don't have to prove anything to her. You guys said family comes first, right? That we support each other no matter what? Even when that family member is destroying other families? I pulled up another photo. This is Amy Chen, 15 years old. Started buying Marcus's pills 6 months ago to help with school stress. Last week, she was found unconscious in her car after taking too many. She's in a medically induced coma at Mercy General. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her parents think she got the drugs at school. They're planning to sue the district, get teachers fired, turn the whole place upside down looking for the dealer. I looked directly at Marcus. Should I tell them where to really look? You're bluffing, Marcus said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. You wouldn't actually try me. The words came out ice cold. You cost me my education. Your actions put a child in a coma. Exactly what loyalty do I owe you? Dad finally found his voice. Marcus, son, we need you to be honest with us right now. I am being honest. She's making all this up because she's jealous that I got help, and she didn't. She's always resented me for being sick, for needing treatment. The treatment that built a meditation garden instead of actually helping you? I pulled out the crumpled thank you letter. The treatment that our parents funded with my college money while you've been dealing drugs out of their basement? Marcus's face went ashen as he recognized the letterhead. That's right. I know about the donation too. The extra money you convinced them to give for additional therapy that never happened. The money that came from my savings account while you told them sob stories about needing extended care. Mom was crying now. Ugly, broken sobs that shook her whole body. Marcus, how could you lie to us like that? I didn't lie. I needed help, and they said the meditation garden would be therapeutic for everyone, not just me. It wasn't stealing, it was investing in healing. Healing? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. Let me show you what your healing looks like. I scrolled to a video taken 3 days ago. Clear footage of Marcus in our garage, counting pills into small baggies while our parents were at work. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m., right when he was supposed to be at his job. The silence stretched so long I could hear the neighbor's dog barking 3 houses away. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Get out. Marcus's head snapped up. What? You heard me. Get your things and get out of my house tonight. Dad, you don't mean that. I'm sick, remember? I need support. You need to face the consequences of your choices. Dad's voice was getting stronger. We enabled this. We chose you over Jessica's future, and you repaid us by lying, stealing, and selling drugs to children. I'm done. Marcus turned to Mom, desperation written across his face. Mom, please, don't let him do this. I can change. I can get clean for real this time. I just need another chance. Get out, Mom whispered, not looking at him. Just get out. As Marcus scrambled to gather his things, alternating between threats and tearful promises, I continued packing my bag, because now I had somewhere to go. Something I'd been planning for months while documenting his crimes and researching my options. The full scholarship to State University that I'd turned down, I'd never actually declined it. I'd asked for a deferral, telling them I needed time to handle a family crisis. The deadline to accept had been yesterday, and I'd already submitted my confirmation. My parents thought they'd destroyed my future to save their son. They were about to learn that some daughters don't stay saved. 3 hours after Marcus slammed the door behind him, Our house felt different, lighter somehow, like a toxin had been removed from the air. I found my parents in the kitchen, Dad staring at his coffee while Mom methodically shredded tissues into tiny pieces. I called State University, I announced, dropping my acceptance letter on the table between them. Mom looked up, her eyes puffy and red. Sweetie, we told you there's no money for... I deferred my full scholarship last year. I'm starting in 2 weeks. The words hit them like physical blows. Dad's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. But you said you turned it down, Mom whispered. You said you wanted to stay home, help with the family. I said what you needed to hear, while I figured out what Marcus was really doing. I pulled out my laptop, opening a folder labeled Evidence Collection. Did you think I'd just accept losing $18,000 without investigating? The screen filled with spreadsheets, photos, timestamps, bank records I'd slowly gathered over 6 months of careful observation. Every lie Marcus had told, every dollar he'd stolen, every kid he'd sold to. All documented with the methodical precision Dad had taught me when helping with his tax preparation. Jesus Christ, Dad breathed, scrolling through the data. How long has this been going on? Since about 3 months after he came home from rehab. That's when Amy Chen started buying from him. She wasn't his first customer, just the youngest. I clicked to another folder. Here's everyone I could identify. 17 kids between ages 15 and 19, most of them honor students looking for study aids. Mom made a choked sound. You've known for 6 months and didn't tell us? I told you he was lying. You chose not to listen. I kept my voice level. Professional. You said I didn't understand addiction, that I was being unsupportive. So I decided to understand it better. I pulled up another document, a detailed analysis of Marcus's behavioral patterns, spending habits, and the correlation between his supposed job schedule and local drug arrest reports. Marcus wasn't just selling his prescription. He was buying pills from 3 different doctors using fake symptoms, then distributing them through a network he built at the community center. The reason Dr. Peterson never questioned his progress was because Marcus was paying him $200 a month to write glowing reports about his recovery. Dad's hands shook as he reached for the printed bank statements. These withdrawals from our savings matched the dates Marcus claimed he needed money for additional therapy sessions. Sessions that never happened because he was paying Dr. Peterson to lie about his progress while he expanded his drug operation. The documentation was devastating. 6 months of careful investigation had revealed not just a relapse, but a calculated criminal enterprise that exploited both his family's trust and vulnerable teenagers' desperation. The meditation garden donation? I clicked to the final folder. Marcus convinced you to contribute extra because he told Riverside that his family wanted to give back to the community. He got a $5,000 kickback that he used to buy inventory for his business. Silence filled the kitchen like floodwater, heavy and suffocating. Why didn't you just confront him directly? Mom finally asked. Why go through all this? Because I needed proof that would hold up in court. I closed the laptop with deliberate care. And because I needed you to see who you chose over your other child. The words hung in the air like a blade. Mom flinched as if I'd struck her. Jessica, we never meant... You chose an active drug dealer over your daughter's education. You funded criminal activity while telling me family comes first. I stood up, shouldering my bag. So I documented everything, and tomorrow morning I'm taking it all to the police. You can't turn in your own brother, Dad said. But his voice lacked conviction. Watch me. I pulled out my phone, showing them a contact labeled Detective Morrison. Amy Chen's family deserves to know who put their daughter in a coma. The Henderson family deserves to know why their scholarship athlete is failing drug tests. Every parent whose child Marcus poisoned deserves the truth. Mom was crying again, but this time I felt nothing. No guilt, no sympathy, no urge to comfort her. If you turn him in, he'll go to prison, she sobbed. He'll have a record. His life will be ruined. His life was already ruined. He just made sure to take other people down with him. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Mom? Dr. Peterson is being investigated by the medical board. Turns out Marcus wasn't his only patient paying for fake progress reports. When they arrest him tomorrow, he's going to cooperate fully to reduce his sentence. How do you know that? Dad asked. I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face. Because I'm the one who reported him. Funny thing about studying criminal justice as backup plan, you learn who to call when you discover ongoing criminal conspiracies. The drive to State University took 3 hours. 3 hours of freedom from the toxic cloud that had been my family home. My dorm room was small but clean, with a view of the quad where normal students worried about normal problems like midterms and cafeteria food. My roommate wasn't arriving until tomorrow, so I had the space to myself as I unpacked the evidence folders and made my final phone calls. Detective Morrison would be at the house by 9 a.m. with a warrant. Dr. Peterson's arrest was scheduled for 10. The medical board would be reviewing Marcus's fake treatment records by noon. By the time my parents realized the full scope of what I'd discovered and documented, their precious son would be in handcuffs, facing charges that carried a minimum sentence of 5 years. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because while they'd been focused on saving Marcus, I'd been building something they never imagined their quiet, obedient daughter was capable of creating. And tomorrow, they'd learn what happens when you sacrifice the wrong child. The call came at 6:47 a.m. My mom's voice so high and panicked it was barely recognizable. They arrested him, Jessica. The police came to the house with a warrant and they arrested Marcus. They're saying he's facing federal charges, that someone gave them months of evidence. Good morning to you too, Mom. I sipped my coffee, watching other freshmen struggle with their move-in day boxes outside my dorm window. How's your morning going? Don't you dare act casual about this. Your brother is in jail because of you. Because you turned in your own family like some kind of spy. Actually, Marcus is in jail because he sold drugs to children and ran a criminal enterprise out of your basement. I just made sure the right people knew about it. The sound she made was somewhere between a sob and a shriek. The lawyer says he could get 20 years. 20 years, Jessica. How can you live with yourself? Pretty easily, actually. I switched the phone to speaker and continued organizing my textbooks. Did you know Amy Chen woke up yesterday? She's going to make a full recovery. No thanks to your son. That wasn't Marcus's fault. She chose to take those pills. She chose to trust a dealer who told her they were safe study aids. A dealer who specifically targeted honor students because he knew they had money and wouldn't report him. I pulled up the news article on my laptop. Funny thing, when the police searched his room, they found a notebook with names, addresses, and detailed profiles of his victims, including their academic schedules, family financial situations, and psychological vulnerabilities. Mom went silent. That's right, your sick, misunderstood son kept records of how to manipulate teenagers more effectively. Amy's entry included notes about her parents' divorce and how desperate she was to maintain her grades to keep them from fighting. He used her family trauma to sell her drugs. You're lying. Check tomorrow's newspaper. They're publishing excerpts. I closed my laptop, enjoying the way the morning sun streamed through my clean windows. Marcus wasn't just dealing, Mom. He was running psychological operations on children. Through the phone, I could hear Dad in the background, his voice muffled but clearly agitated. Then Mom was back, her tone shifting from hysteria to cold fury. We know what you did. We talked to Dr. Peterson's lawyer. You wore a wire to their meetings, recorded him admitting to falsifying records. You've been planning this for months. 7 months, actually, since the day you told me there was no money left for college, but mysteriously found $5,000 for Marcus's extended therapy. I started hanging my clothes in the tiny closet, each movement deliberate and calm. That's when I knew you were lying about something. You betrayed your own family. I exposed criminals who happened to share my DNA. There's a difference. I paused, looking at the framed photo I'd brought, me and my parents at my high school graduation. All of us smiling like we believed in the future. Tell me, Mom, when exactly did you plan to mention that Marcus stole the medication from your nursing station at work? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. What? The pills he was selling weren't just his prescription. He was stealing Adderall, Ritalin, and OxyContin from the hospital where you work, using your access codes, your schedule, your security clearance. I heard papers rustling as Dad presumably grabbed for the phone. The DEA audit starts Monday. They'll trace every missing pill back to your shifts. Dad's voice came on the line, shaky and desperate. Jessica, whatever evidence you have about your mother, surely we can work something out. She didn't know. She's innocent, is she? I pulled out a final folder, one I'd kept separate from everything I'd given the police. Because according to the security footage I obtained, Mom knew exactly what was happening. The video was damning. Clear shots of my mother unlocking the medication cabinet while Marcus waited in the hallway, footage of her handing him bottles of controlled substances, timestamps showing this happened at least twice a week for the past 4 months. You see, I didn't just investigate Marcus. I investigated everyone who enabled him. And Mom, you weren't just enabling, you were actively participating. You can't have that footage. Hospital security wouldn't give it to you. I smiled, remembering the conversation with James Morrison, Detective Morrison's younger brother who worked hospital IT security. He'd been very interested in my theory about internal theft, especially after I showed him the correlation between Marcus's selling schedule and the missing medication reports. Actually, they were very cooperative once I explained what I suspected. Turns out, the hospital has been losing thousands of dollars in controlled substances, and they've been looking for the source. I could hear Mom crying now, ugly, gasping sobs. They're grateful to finally have answers. Jessica, please, Dad begged. Your mother could lose her license, her career. She could go to prison too. She could have thought about that before she decided my college fund was less important than covering for Marcus's criminal enterprise. I sat on my narrow dorm bed, looking out at a campus full of students whose parents had actually prioritized their education. Did either of you, for even one moment, consider what you were taking from me? We thought we were helping our son get better. You thought you were taking the easy way out. It was easier to steal medication than to admit Marcus was beyond help. Easier to spend my money than to set boundaries. Easier to enable his addiction than to face the fact that you'd raised a predator. I could hear sirens in the background through the phone, getting closer to their house. That'll be the DEA, right on schedule. Mom, You might want to call a lawyer, a real one, not Dr. Peterson's friend who specializes in medical malpractice. I stood up, walking to my window where I could see students playing frisbee on the quad. I hear federal prosecutors aren't very sympathetic to healthcare workers who steal narcotics to supply their dealer children. How can you do this to us? Mom whispered. We're your family. Family doesn't steal from each other to fund drug operations. Family doesn't sacrifice one child's future for another child's addiction. Family doesn't put innocent kids in comas. I watched a group of freshmen help each other carry boxes up the dormitory steps, strangers showing more care for each other than my parents had shown me in months. But you taught me something valuable about family. What's that? Sometimes the best family decision is to remove the toxic members. The sirens stopped, probably in their driveway now. I could hear pounding on their door, official voices shouting about warrants and federal agents. I have to go register for classes now. Criminal justice major with a minor in psychology. Turns out I have a real talent for investigation. I gathered my documentation folder, checking that everything was properly organized. Oh, and don't bother calling this number again. I'm changing it this afternoon. Jessica, wait. I hung up and immediately blocked their numbers, then sat in the perfect silence of my new life. Outside, normal families were saying goodbye to their children, hugging them with pride and love before driving away to leave them to build their futures. Through my window, I could see other students comparing schedules, making plans for study groups, talking about internships and career goals, and all the possibilities that came with having parents who believed in investing in their children's success rather than their failures. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison, both parents in custody. They're asking for you. Want to press charges for the theft of your college fund? I typed back quickly, absolutely. I'll be there tomorrow with full documentation. Because I'd spent 7 months learning that justice wasn't something that just happened to bad people. Justice was something you built, piece by careful piece, until the weight of evidence was too heavy for lies to hold up. And I was just getting started. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but it felt massive with the weight of 7 months of documentation spread across the prosecution's table. I sat in the front row, watching my parents at the defendant's table, both wearing the kind of cheap suits that screamed public defender budget. Marcus had been sentenced 3 days earlier, 15 years for distribution of narcotics to minors, with additional charges for theft and operating a criminal enterprise. He'd tried to plea bargain by offering information about his suppliers, but there was nothing to offer. He'd been the top of his small, toxic food chain. Now it was my parents' turn. Mom kept glancing back at me, her eyes pleading for some sign of forgiveness that would never come. Dad stared straight ahead, his shoulders curved in defeat. The confident man who'd lectured me about responsibility and planning ahead looked like he'd aged a decade in the 3 weeks since their arrest. The prosecutor, Janet Chen, Amy's older sister as it turned out, stood to address the judge with the same methodical precision I'd learned to admire during our preparation meetings. Your Honor, the defendants stand accused of theft, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and endangering the welfare of children. The evidence will show that Diane Sterling, a registered nurse with 22 years of experience, systematically stole narcotics from her workplace to supply her son's drug operation. Robert Sterling, fully aware of both the theft and the distribution, used his daughter's college savings to fund and expand the criminal enterprise. She gestured toward the evidence table, which looked like the result of my obsessive documentation project come to life. Bank records, hospital security footage, text message transcripts, recorded conversations, witness statements from 17 victims' families. Everything I'd gathered during 7 months of treating my family like the criminal organization they'd become. The prosecution will prove that these defendants chose to sacrifice their daughter's future and endanger numerous children rather than confront their son's addiction through legal means. Mom's lawyer, a tired-looking woman who'd clearly drawn the short straw, stood up with obvious reluctance. Your Honor, my clients are loving parents who made poor decisions while trying to help their sick child. They believed they were funding legitimate treatment, not criminal activity. I almost laughed. Almost. The first witness was James Morrison from hospital security, who walked the jury through the footage of Mom systematically stealing medication over 4 months. The video was damning. There was no possible way to interpret her actions as anything other than deliberate theft. Mrs. Sterling had access to the medication cabinet and knew the security protocols, James testified, his voice steady and professional. These weren't random thefts or mistakes in documentation. She specifically targeted high-value controlled substances that matched the inventory found in her son's possession. Next came Detective Morrison, who detailed the scope of Marcus's operation and my parents' financial contributions to it. The timeline was devastating. Every withdrawal from my college fund corresponded exactly to a major drug purchase or expansion of Marcus's territory. The defendants weren't victims of their son's deception, Detective Morrison explained to the jury. They were active participants who funded the operation even after they discovered its true nature. Then came the recorded conversation I'd made with Dr. Peterson before his arrest, where he detailed how my parents had paid him to falsify progress reports while knowing Marcus was selling drugs. Mrs. Sterling specifically asked me to document improvement that wasn't occurring. Dr. Peterson's voice filled the courtroom through the speakers. She said it was important for family harmony that everyone believed Marcus was recovering, even if he wasn't. But the most devastating testimony came from Amy Chen herself. 17 years old, wearing a simple blue dress that made her look even younger, she took the stand with the quiet dignity of someone who'd survived something terrible. Marcus knew about my parents' divorce, she said, her voice clear and strong. He knew I was desperate to keep my grades up so they wouldn't blame me for their problems. He told me the pills were safe, that lots of students used them, that it would help me be the daughter my parents needed. She looked directly at my mother. When I started having problems, when the pills stopped working and I needed more, Marcus said his mom could get me stronger ones. He said she was a nurse who understood students like me. The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of someone crying. I turned to see it was Mrs. Chen, Amy's mother, who'd become an unexpected ally during the investigation. He had a whole notebook about me, about how my parents fought, about my scholarship requirements, about how much money I had access to. Amy's voice never wavered. He turned my family's problems into a business plan. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with 7 months' worth of evidence folders, feeling more prepared than I'd ever felt for anything in my life. Miss Sterling, Janet Chen began, when did you first suspect your parents were involved in your brother's criminal activity? When they told me my college fund was gone for Marcus's treatment, but I could see from their bank records that they'd continued spending money on his supposed recovery, even after he was caught selling drugs at the community center. I detailed the investigation methodically, explaining how each piece of evidence led to the next discovery, how a simple audit of household finances revealed systematic theft, how hospital security logs correlated perfectly with Marcus's inventory increases, how recorded conversations proved my parents knew exactly what they were funding. At any point during your investigation, did your parents express concern about the children who were buying drugs from your brother? Never. Their only concern was protecting Marcus from consequences and maintaining the fiction that he was in recovery. And when you presented them with evidence of harm to other families, they blamed the victims. They said teenagers who bought drugs were making their own choices, and Marcus wasn't responsible for what happened afterward. I looked directly at my parents for the first time since taking the stand. Mom was staring at her hands, but Dad was looking right back at me with something that might have been pride mixed with devastation. They chose Marcus's comfort over 17 families' safety. They chose his criminal enterprise over my education. They chose lies over truth at every opportunity. I turned back to the prosecutor. So I chose justice over family loyalty. The defense tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter seeking revenge, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Every question they asked just gave me another opportunity to detail my parents' choices with clinical precision. When the jury returned after 2 hours of deliberation, I felt strangely calm. Justice wasn't a feeling, it was a process. And I'd built the process carefully, methodically, with the same attention to detail my dad had taught me when helping with his tax preparation. On the charge of theft of controlled substances, we find the defendant, Diane Sterling, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to distribute narcotics, we find the defendant, Diane Sterling, guilty. On the charge of endangering the welfare of children, we find both defendants guilty. The sentences were everything I'd hoped for. Mom got 12 years for the theft and conspiracy charges. Dad got 8 years for financial conspiracy and child endangerment. Both would be eligible for parole in 6 years, assuming good behavior. As the bailiff led them away in handcuffs, Mom looked back at me one last time. Her lips formed the word please, but I just gathered my documentation folders and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, Janet Chen caught up with me, her expression something between admiration and concern. You know, most families wouldn't have gone this far. Most daughters would have tried to work things out privately. I shouldered my bag, thinking about Amy Chen unconscious in a hospital bed, about the Henderson family's destroyed scholarship dreams, about 17 families who'd trusted their children to be safe in their own community. Most daughters don't have to choose between family loyalty and preventing more children from being poisoned. I looked back at the courthouse where my parents were beginning their journey into the criminal justice system. I chose the children because that's what real family does. It protects the innocent, even when the guilty share your name. 2 years later, I stood in the campus police station wearing my criminal justice internship badge, reviewing case files for Detective Morrison's investigation unit. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd become exactly what my family had feared. Someone who chose law and order over family protection. My phone buzzed with a message from my academic advisor. Congratulations on the FBI summer internship acceptance. Well deserved. Through the window, I could see State University's quad where students worried about normal problems like midterms and dating. I'd built a life here based on merit, surrounded by people who believed in justice and accountability. My grades were perfect, my professors wrote glowing recommendations, and every law enforcement agency I'd applied to wanted to interview me. The case that made my reputation wasn't even my family's family's destruction? It was the follow-up investigation that uncovered Dr. Peterson's network of corrupt medical professionals. My documentation methods had helped law enforcement identify 12 other doctors falsifying patient records, leading to a federal task force that revolutionized how medical fraud was prosecuted. I'd testified before Congress about healthcare corruption. My case study was required reading in criminal justice programs at 6 universities. The FBI had offered me a position in their white-collar crime division before I'd even finished my undergraduate degree, all because I'd chosen to document rather than enable. My desk phone rang, interrupting my review of the morning's case files. "Sterling, you have visitors," the desk sergeant announced. I looked up to see 2 people I barely recognized. My mother looked gaunt, her hair completely gray, wearing the kind of discount clothes that marked someone living on a social worker's budget. My father appeared to have shrunk, his once confident posture replaced by the careful movements of someone accustomed to institutional life. They'd been released 6 months early for good behavior, but neither had contacted me until now. "Hi, Jessica," Mom said softly, twisting the strap of a worn purse. "You look well. Professional." I didn't invite them to sit. "If you're here to ask for help with housing or employment, there are social services available for ex-felons. The desk sergeant can give you information." "We're not here for that," Dad said. "We just wanted to see you. To tell you that we understand why you did what you did." "Do you?" I leaned back in my chair, studying them with the same clinical detachment I'd learned to apply to case files. "Because understanding would require acknowledging that you prioritized an active drug dealer over your other child's future." Mom flinched. "We know we made terrible mistakes." "You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to steal medication to fund criminal activity. You chose to sacrifice my education for Marcus's comfort. You chose to enable someone who was poisoning children." I gestured toward the case files on my desk. "I investigate criminals for a living now. You were criminals. We were parents trying to help our sick son," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Amy Chen was in a medically induced coma for 3 days because of your sick son. The Henderson girl lost her scholarship because of your sick son. 17 families were destroyed because you decided your son's addiction was more important than their children's safety." I pulled out a folder labeled Sterling Family Impact Assessment, something I'd compiled for my own closure, not for any official purpose. "Would you like to know what happened to Marcus's victims while you were in prison?" I opened it without waiting for an answer. "Amy Chen changed schools, developed anxiety disorder, lost her early admission to 3 colleges. She's working at a coffee shop now, still trying to rebuild her academic career." Mom made a choking sound. "The Henderson girl attempted suicide 6 months after losing her scholarship. She survived, but she'll never swim competitively again due to the physical damage." I turned a page. 2 other families moved out of state to escape the stigma of having children who'd bought drugs. One marriage ended in divorce because the parents blamed each other for not preventing their son's involvement with Marcus. "Jessica, please." "Please what?" "Please pretend your choices didn't have consequences. Please act like family loyalty matters more than 17 destroyed families." I closed the folder. I chose justice over family loyalty, and I've never regretted it for a single day. Dad tried a different approach. "We heard you're graduating summa cum laude, that you have job offers from federal agencies. We're proud of you. Your pride is irrelevant. I achieved everything despite your interference, not because of your support." I stood up, towering over both of them in my professional attire. I built my success on the foundation of refusing to enable criminal behavior, even when it came from people who shared my DNA. "We love you," Mom whispered. "You love the idea of a compliant daughter who would sacrifice her future for her brother's addiction. You never loved the person who demanded accountability." I gathered my case files. "That person chose law enforcement as a career specifically to ensure people like you face consequences for their choices." They stood there looking lost. 2 people who'd gambled their daughter's future on their son's comfort and lost everything. "What do we do now?" Dad asked. "You rebuild your lives the same way your victims had to rebuild theirs. You get jobs that will hire ex-felons. You find housing that accepts people with criminal records. You live with the permanent consequences of your choices." I moved toward the door. "And you remember that your daughter is successful despite your betrayal, not because of your support." As they walked away, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt the same satisfaction I experienced whenever a case closed with justice served. Not happiness exactly, but the calm certainty that came from choosing principles over emotions. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from Amy Chen. "Saw the news about your FBI acceptance. Thank you for choosing us over them." Through my office window, I could see my parents getting into a rusted sedan, driving away to whatever small lives they'd managed to build from the wreckage of their choices. In 6 months, I'd be working federal white-collar crime cases, hunting down people who exploited vulnerable populations for profit, people exactly like my family had been. I'd learned the most important lesson of my life while watching my parents sacrifice my future for my brother's addiction. Family isn't defined by shared blood, but by shared values. And when those values diverge irreconcilably, you choose the values that protect innocent people over the family that destroys them. I'd chosen correctly then, and I'd keep choosing correctly for the rest of my career, because somewhere out there, Another Amy Chen was trusting adults to protect her instead of exploit her. Another scholarship student was working hard, believing effort would be rewarded. Another family was assuming their community was safe for their children. Those families deserved someone who valued justice over loyalty, truth over comfort, accountability over excuses. They deserved someone who'd learned that real love sometimes means destroying the people you're supposed to protect when those people become predators. And I'd spend the rest of my life making sure they got exactly that.